Welcome to my video on the Masters of Enterprise, Astor, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Prosperity. My name is Kevin Eanes, and this video is intended for my History USA 1 class. As the market revolution progressed, the right to compete for economic advancement became essential. Many Americans seized the opportunity to become rich and become self-made men. Three of these Americans are John Jacob Astor, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and Andrew Carnegie. And these are the three men we will discuss, along with the topic of prosperity in the market revolution of the early 1800s. We'll begin with John Jacob Astor. A son of a German butcher, Astor immigrated to the United States in 1783. He earned large profits in the export and import business. Astor shipped American furs to China and in turn received tea and silk. His base of operations was on the Pacific coast in Oregon. Further inland, his American Fur Company settled the headquarters of its western department at St. Louis and operated out of Fort Union at the mouth of the Yellowstone River, which is present-day Williston, North Dakota. Astor then created his second fortune in real estate. Astor subdivided the northern half of Manhattan Island, and he created Central Park. And when John Jacob Astor died in 1848, he was the richest man in the United States. Astor was considered a self-made man. He made his fortune through hard work, not through inheritance, such as what one would see in Europe. This belief in the self-made man was supported by Andrew Jackson and his followers. When asked if whether or not he could have done anything different in his life about his fortune, Astor replied, "Could I begin life again, knowing what I know now, and had money to invest, I would buy every foot of the island of Manhattan." And I pulled this quote from H.W. Brands' Masters of Enterprise. Also, I took the title of this video from that as well. After Astor's death, his family increased his holdings. His son William developed the property below Central Park and made several contributions to the Astor Library. His grandson, John Jacob Astor III, donated the Astor Library to the city of New York, and there it became the New York Public Library. In 1859, John Jacob Astor III built a home at 228 Fifth Avenue. John Jacob Astor III's son, William Waldorf Astor, built the Waldorf Hotel on the site. Another one of John Jacob Astor's great-grandsons, this is John Jacob Astor IV, convinced his mother Lena to move off of her property, and she happened to live next door to the Waldorf Hotel. And with this property, John Jacob Astor IV constructed the Astoria Hotel. Today, this is the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, although it's no longer located on Fifth Avenue, but is located on Park Avenue, for the original hotel was demolished in 1929 to make way for one of the more iconic buildings in New York City, the Empire State Building. John Jacob Astor IV is famous in his own right. He had a nickname, Jack. And Jack, through a century of marriages among his ancestors, Jack Astor could claim relations to the Livingston family of steamboat fame, the Franklin Roosevelt line of Roosevelts, and the Vanderbilt family. At Harvard, Jack was given the name Jack Astor, that's spelled with two S's, for his lack of interest in education. But perhaps you know Jack best if you ever watched the 1997 blockbuster movie Titanic, for he and his wife were passengers on the ill-fated voyage in 1912. In fact, Jack perished along with 1,517 other passengers and crew when the ship sank. The Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt. Story begins in 1817 when Vanderbilt operated a steamboat between New Jersey and New York for one Thomas Gibbons. Gibbons competed for steamboat traffic with the Livingston family, and Gibbons's attempts to bankrupt the Livingstons brought about the Supreme Court case Gibbons versus Ogden, in which the Supreme Court decided that the states had no power to interfere with interstate commerce. By 1830, Vanderbilt was his own man, and he operated steamship lines from Long Island to New Jersey. By the 1850s, Vanderbilt switched from regional lines to ocean-going steamships, and the reason for this was the California Gold Rush of 1849. After the Civil War, Vanderbilt switched from steamships to railroads, and his line, the New York Central, connected New York City to Chicago by rail, thus linking the nation's two largest cities at the time. And with his wealth, Vanderbilt endowed $1 million to Central University in Nashville, Tennessee, and it was then renamed Vanderbilt University. Our third master of enterprise is Andrew Carnegie. His story is a story of rags to riches. Andrew Carnegie was an immigrant from Scotland who came in the 1840s. His family settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Carnegie entered the workforce at the age of 11 after his father died, and his first job was a bobbin boy in a textile mill. Carnegie taught himself Morse code, and he became a runner for the telegraph company. By the Civil War, Carnegie had risen to the position of secretary of the Pennsylvania Railroad, in which he worked for Thomas Scott. When President Lincoln called Scott to Washington to coordinate the nation's railroads during the Civil War, Scott left his railroad in the hands of Andrew Carnegie. Along the way, along his progression into management, Carnegie played the stock market and became wealthy. Taking this fortune, Carnegie invested in steel and created the company Carnegie Steel. By 1900, Carnegie Steel was the largest integrated iron, coke, and steel operation in the country. Today, we know Carnegie Steel best as U.S. Steel. Carnegie believed that entrepreneurs were public benefactors for the public good. In his book, The Gospel of Wealth, Carnegie argued that the rich must be stewards for society and that the rich must transform old-fashioned charity into modern philanthropy. Thus, in the early 1900s, Carnegie gave most of his wealth away. By the time he died in 1919, Carnegie had financed more than 3,000 libraries in 47 states, including the libraries in Alamosa and in Monte Vista. Carnegie said, quote, there is not such a cradle of democracy upon the earth as the free public library. This republic of letters, where neither rank, office, nor wealth receives the slightest consideration. And these words I pulled from a wall on another library that Carnegie's money helped found, and that is the library in the city of Dallas, Texas. And it just so happens that this mural with this quote is just down the hall from a first edition print of the Declaration of Independence, and right beside that is a first edition folio of Shakespeare's plays. Carnegie also endowed and lent his name to universities. He is the Carnegie of Carnegie Mellon University, research facilities, public bathhouses, well, back when they had such a thing, peace organizations, the restoration of 700 church organs, pension funds for college professors. Maybe that's one reason why history profs like him so well. And he created heroes funds in 11 countries for soldiers during World War I. In terms of dollars, Carnegie gave away $350 million in his lifetime. In 2019 dollars, and that's the closest figure I have, that approximates to about 5.25 billion. All in all, a reason we study the market revolution in the early half of the 1800s is that it widened the gap between the rich and the poor in the United States. This is an inequality of wealth, something that on a macro level we are all familiar with. While men such as Astor and Vanderbilt and Carnegie became obscenely wealthy through their hard work, men who could not pay off their debts rotted in jail. In the 1820s, working men's parties sought to mobilize lower class support for candidates by calling for free public education, the end to the concept of debtor's prison, and the passage of legislation for a 10-hour workday. However, these working man parties were very short-lived political organizations. They really were not well-organized labor organizations. And certainly weren't a bona fide labor union. That comes in the second half of the 1800s. Labor strikes were common in the 1830s, but these labor strikes were nothing compared to the strikes of the late 19th or the 20th or the 21st centuries. Nothing like what you would see today. Because at this time, workers would simply just walk off the job one day and then they'd return back to work the next day as if nothing had ever happened. While many Americans welcomed the market revolution, others dread its consequences. John Adams said that commerce has destroyed every Republican government. Thomas Jefferson hated businessmen for leading the United States away from his agrarian ideal. Langston Bowsley called wage labor the essence of slavery. And we'll learn more about Bowsley in Module 12. I want to thank you for watching this video on the Masters of Enterprise, the biographies of Astor, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and a small discussion on the prosperity of the market revolution. And as always, May the force be with you. Thank you.